And we now have 9 children. The older ones were all there when it happened. Initially, I wasn't able to.
20 years. That's how long Barry Plath has gone without sitting across a table from a woman who wasn't his wife, his daughter, or a stranger he was politely making small talk with at church. 20 years of raising 9 children, running a farm, and building a public identity as one half of the most talked about family in reality television. And in this episode, that streak ends. But that's not even the moment that's going to stop you in your tracks tonight. Because in the same hour, Kim Plath, the woman who has spent years on camera holding this family together through faith, grief, and heartbreak, finally walks through a door she has avoided for nearly 2 decades. A therapist's office. The subject on the table, her son Joshua, the child she lost, whose death has shaped every version of this family we've ever seen on screen. If you've followed the Plaths since the beginning, you already know this family doesn't do vulnerability easily. So when the matriarch finally cracks that door open, and the patriarch finally opens his heart to someone new, you know something in this family is shifting for good. Stay with us, because we're breaking down every emotional beat of this episode, what it means for Kim, for Barry, and for a family that has spent 8 seasons trying to figure out who they are once the rules that used to define them are gone. For anyone just discovering this story, here's the fast version, because context is everything with this family. Welcome to Plathville. First put Kim and Barry Plath and their 9 children in front of cameras years ago, introducing America to a household built on strict, self-described, old-fashioned values. No soda, no mainstream pop culture, limited technology, and a home-centered life that felt, to a lot of viewers, like stepping into a different decade entirely. What made this show a phenomenon wasn't the lifestyle alone. It was watching that lifestyle collide, season after season, with the ordinary human desire of young people to grow up, question what they were taught, and choose their own paths. Older children like Ethan, Micah, Mariah, and Isaac became the emotional core of the early seasons precisely because their journeys away from their parents' rules were so raw and, frankly, so relatable to anyone who has ever had to separate from a strict household to figure out who they actually are. But underneath every one of those storylines has been a quieter, heavier one. The story of Joshua Plath. Joshua was Kim and Barry's second child, and he died as an infant, 18 years ago in the timeline of this family. That loss isn't a plot twist the show invented for drama. It is a real, permanent wound that has shaped how Kim parents, how she processes fear, and, according to what she and Barry have shared across previous seasons, how she has struggled with grief she has never fully been able to sit with. For years, the show has hinted at this pain without giving Kim the space to actually process it in a clinical, structured way. That's exactly why this episode carries so much weight. This isn't a filler episode about family drama for its own sake. This is the episode where the show's 2 long-running emotional threads, Barry's isolation since the couple's divorce, and Kim's unresolved grief over Joshua, both come to a head in the same 40-something minutes of television. It's also worth understanding where this episode sits in Season 8's bigger picture. This is a season defined by transition. Kim is rebuilding her sense of home and identity on the family farm. Ethan is in the middle of trying to start a new chapter for himself away from Georgia. Isaac and Kaylin are navigating a relationship that has hit real turbulence. And Lydia and Zach, now newlyweds, are still working through tension with the rest of the family that dates back to before their wedding. Every one of these threads intersects with the 2 we're focusing on tonight, because in this family, nothing happens in isolation. When Kim has a hard conversation with Lydia in a car, it doesn't stay contained to that car. It ripples into how Kim processes her own grief later that same day. That's the storytelling engine of this episode, and it's why it's landed as one of the most emotionally direct hours of the season, according to how episode guides and recap outlets have described it. Let's walk through this hour in order, because the sequencing matters. The emotional impact of this episode isn't just about what happens, it's about what happens right before it. The episode opens with Barry stepping into something he has not done in 2 full decades, dating. According to the official episode description, Barry goes on his first date in over 20 years, a storyline the show has been building toward for several episodes now. ever since Barry acknowledged on camera that he was ready to start putting himself back out there after 25 years of marriage and its aftermath. For a man who has spent this entire series being defined primarily as a father and, for a long stretch, as one half of a marriage that the audience watched unravel, this is new territory, both for Barry and for the audience watching him navigate it. Dating after 2 decades isn't like dating in your 20s. It comes with baggage, with self-consciousness, with the very real fear of being seen and judged, especially by a man who has built a public identity around control and structure for most of his adult life. Whatever happens on that date, whether it's awkward, sweet, hopeful, or a little bit of all three, the significance isn't really about the date itself. It's about what it represents. Barry choosing publicly to move forward. While Barry is out taking that step into his future, the show pivots to Kim, and this is where the episode's emotional center of gravity really lives. Kim and her daughter Lydia are in the car together, and what starts as a normal ride turns into something much heavier. According to the episode synopsis, Kim and Lydia's car ride takes a big U-turn when Kim brings up Lydia and Zach's judgmental behavior. This isn't a small aside. This is Kim directly confronting one of her own children about how she and her new husband have been treating the rest of the family. If you've watched this show for any length of time, you know these confrontations rarely stay calm and clean. They tend to surface old wounds, unspoken resentments, and years of accumulated hurt in a matter of minutes. And that's exactly what seems to happen here. The conversation clearly doesn't just address the surface-level issue. It opens something up in Kim that she wasn't necessarily prepared for. And that's the pivot point of the entire episode. Reeling from that car ride, Kim seeks counseling about Joshua's death for the first time. Read that again because it's the single most significant sentence in this episode's description. For the first time. Not the first time this season. The first time period as far as the show's timeline goes. This is a woman who lost a child 18 years ago, who has carried that loss through a public divorce, a public reinvention of her identity, and years of raising the rest of her children in front of cameras, and she has never sat down with a professional to process it, at least not on the record. Whatever triggered it, and the show is telling us clearly that the confrontation with Lydia is what triggered it, Kim walks into that first session raw, unguarded, and finally ready to talk about the son she lost. What follows, based on the broader episode guide for this stretch of the season, is a deeply emotional therapy session. One intense enough that Kim later feels prepared to lead a family discussion about Joshua's death. A conversation the family appears to have needed for a very long time and simply never had the tools or the timing to have before. That follow-up conversation, which continues into the next episode according to the guide, becomes the moment where the family clears the air with Lydia and Zach before coming together to honor Joshua, who died 18 years earlier. So this episode isn't just a single emotional beat. It's the ignition point for what looks like one of the most significant family reckonings the show has attempted in its 8 seasons. Running alongside all of this, the episode also touches on Zach and Lydia's ongoing struggle to mend fences with the rest of the family after their wedding, and gives us movement in Ethan's storyline as he takes what's been described as a leap of faith, while Isaac and Kaylin continue to hit a rocky patch in their relationship. These threads don't overshadow the Barry and Kim stories, but they add texture to an episode that is, at its core, about a family standing at a crossroads on multiple fronts simultaneously. A father tentatively stepping toward a new future, and a mother finally turning to face her past. Now let's talk about why this particular combination of storylines, Barry's date and Kim's therapy session, lands with so much weight. Because it's not an accident that the show chose to pair them in the same hour. Barry and Kim's divorce was one of the most significant ruptures in this show's history. For years, viewers watched two people who had built an entire identity, an entire household, and an entire worldview together slowly grow apart on screen, ultimately ending their marriage. Since then, the show has tracked both of them rebuilding separate lives, Kim reinventing herself, reclaiming parts of her identity that she says were suppressed during the marriage, and Barry adjusting to a version of life he never expected to be living at this stage. Watching Barry take a genuine step toward dating again isn't just a cute B-story. It's a marker of how far he's come from the man we met in earlier seasons, and it raises real questions for viewers about what a new relationship might mean for his relationship with his children, with Kim, and with the public image the family has cultivated for years. Kim's storyline carries an entirely different weight because grief doesn't operate on the same timeline as personal reinvention. You can decide to start dating again. You can't simply decide to be done grieving a child. What makes this moment so significant is the specific chain of events the show lays out. It takes a painful confrontation with her own daughter to finally push Kim toward the help she has apparently needed for 18 years. That's an incredibly honest and frankly uncomfortable thing for the show to put on screen, because it doesn't flatter anyone. It doesn't suggest Kim proactively sought healing on her own terms. It suggests that sometimes the people who look the most composed on camera are running on unprocessed pain that eventually catches up with them, often at the worst possible moment, triggered by conflict they didn't see coming. There's also a broader cultural point worth making here, and it's one that goes beyond this one family. Therapy, and the willingness to seek it, has become one of the most visible cultural shifts of the last decade, especially in communities that have historically treated mental health support as unnecessary, private, or even shameful. The Plath family's original public identity was built, in part, around an insular, traditionalist worldview where outside professional help, whether medical, psychological, or otherwise, wasn't always part of the picture. Watching the matriarch of that family walk into a therapist's office for the first time on camera at this stage of her life is a meaningful marker of how far this family's relationship with vulnerability has evolved since the show began. Reports and recaps across entertainment outlets have consistently framed this arc as one of the more mature, grounded storylines the show has produced in recent seasons, a shift away from pure interpersonal drama towards something closer to honest emotional. Based on the episode guide for the season, we already know where at least part of this story is headed. The therapy session Kim has in this episode directly sets up the next chapter, an emotional family discussion about Joshua, a reckoning with Lydia and Zach over the judgmental behavior that started this whole chain reaction, and ultimately a moment where the family comes together to honor Joshua on what appears to be a meaningful anniversary marker, 18 years after his death. That's a significant narrative commitment for the show to make, dedicating real screen time to grief processing rather than treating it as a passing emotional beat. For Barry, the show's own season guide indicates his dating storyline continues to develop in the episodes that follow, including him turning to a matchmaker as he continues that journey, and later scenes involving him learning what people in his community are saying about him as his personal life becomes more public. That tells us this isn't a one-episode storyline that resolves neatly. It's an ongoing arc the show intends to track across the rest of the season, mirroring how it has always treated the family's biggest life transitions as season-long journeys rather than single-episode moments. The bigger picture here is a family that, 8 seasons in, is still fundamentally about the same thing it's always been about: people who were raised inside a very specific, very structured worldview, figuring out, sometimes gracefully, sometimes messily, how to build lives that are genuinely their own. Barry stepping into dating and Kim stepping into therapy are, in a strange way, mirror images of the same process. Both are choosing, at different speeds and for different reasons, to stop simply enduring their circumstances and start actively shaping what comes next. At the end of the day, the reason this episode resonates isn't really about Barry's dating profile or Kim's therapist's office. It's about something almost every viewer watching at home has lived through in some form. The moment when an old argument with someone you love cracks open a wound you thought you had sealed shut, and the moment when someone you care about finally, after years of watching them hold everything together, admits they need help. For viewers who have lost someone, Kim's storyline in particular is likely to land hard, not because of anything sensational about it, but because of how ordinary and painfully familiar the setup is. A fight with a family member surfacing grief you didn't know was still that close to the surface. And for viewers who have watched a parent start over romantically later in life, whether their own parent or someone in their extended family, Barry's storyline offers something gentler, a reminder that starting over is possible at any age, even after decades of one version of life. That's really the emotional through line of this entire episode, and arguably of this entire season. This isn't a family defined anymore by the rules they were raised under. It's a family defined by how each of them, individually, is learning to move forward, sometimes toward new love, sometimes toward long overdue healing, and sometimes, as this episode shows us, toward both at exactly the same time. That's our full breakdown of Where the Rubber Meets the Road, Season 8, Episode 10 of Welcome to Plathville. If this recap helped you catch every detail and every emotional gut punch in this episode, do us a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this kind of in-depth recap reach more people who are following this family story. We want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Kim's therapy breakthrough was a long time coming? And are you rooting for Barry as he steps back into dating after 20 years? And if you want breakdowns like this waiting for you every time a new episode drops, go ahead and subscribe, because we're covering every twist this family goes through. All season long. Last episode, we watched Kim Plath walk into a therapist's office for the first time in her life, finally ready to talk about the son she lost 18 years ago. That session didn't just help her. It armed her. Because in this episode, Kim walks out of therapy and straight into the hardest conversation this family has had in years, sitting the entire household down to finally confront Lydia and Zach about behavior that has quietly been hurting this family since before their wedding day. But that confrontation isn't where this episode ends. It's where it begins. Because after the air finally clears, this family does something it has apparently never done on camera before. They come together, all of them, to honor Joshua, the brother and son they lost 18 years ago. And just when you think this hour is winding down toward healing, there's one more twist waiting. Lydia and Zach, still processing everything that was just said to them, get handed another surprise from the family they thought they already knew everything about. Stay with us, because this is the episode where Welcome to Plathville stops circling its deepest wound and finally walks straight into it. If you watched our breakdown of the previous episode, you already know the setup. A tense car ride between Kim and her daughter Lydia turned into a confrontation about Lydia and Zach's judgmental behavior toward the rest of the family, a pattern that reporting around this season has confirmed dates back to tension in the run-up to Lydia and Zach's wedding. That confrontation didn't stay contained to the car. It cracked something open in Kim that had been sealed for 18 years, and reeling from that conversation, she sought counseling about Joshua's death for the first time in her life. According to the season's episode guide, that therapy session left her feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time on this subject: prepared. Prepared enough specifically to lead a family discussion about Joshua's death, something this family, by every indication the show has given us across 8 seasons, had never actually done together in any structured way.